does it mean if somebody knows a word? Well, a word in English has many different parts to it that you need to know in order to know the word. Things like the meaning of the word, the spelling of the word, and the sound of how the word is pronounced. We have technical terms for each of these aspects of word knowledge. That's part of the linguistic description of word. The spelling and the sound of a word can be broken down into smaller pieces. For example, the word cats has 4 different letters that spell it that make up 4 graphemes: the C, the A, the T, and the S. The word cats also has 4 phonemes to it. There are 4 sounds that make up the word: the K, the A, the T, and the S. Just like spelling and sound, the meaning of a word can sometimes be broken down into parts where each little meaningful bit is a part of that word called a morpheme. So cats has cat and s for the plural. Independent has in and depend and nt. The distinctive letters that make up the sounds of a word are called graphemes. The distinctive sounds that make up a word are called phonemes. The distinctive little meaningful bits that make up a word are called morphemes. And all of this information about words is stored in our mental lexicon, our mental dictionary of words. Terms grapheme, phoneme, morpheme are used for abstract objects that are part of the grammar of a language or our knowledge of a language. These abstract objects can be distinguished from the concrete expression of those objects. Each grapheme, the representation of the sounds and the spelling of a word, is made up of 1 or more graphs, individual letters. Each phoneme, a distinctive sound in a word, is made up of 1 or more phones, an individual speech sound. Each morpheme is made up of 1 or more morphs, different combinations of letters and speech sounds that can spell out or sound out the same meaning. When a grapheme, phoneme, or morpheme has more than one way it can be expressed, that group of graphs or phones or morphs that are grouped together is part of our linguistic knowledge. For example, the different spellings, the different representation as graphs of a grapheme, a particular sound spelling combination, are called allographs. So the different ways we can spell out a sound can be referred to as a group as allographs. The different pronunciations, representations as individual phones or speech sounds for a phoneme, are called allophones. And the different forms we can find a morpheme in, so the representation of a morpheme as different morphs, particular spellings and sounds, are called allomorphs. Some examples will hopefully clarify these terms. The words dogs and cats are each composed of 2 morphemes. We have dogness plus the plural and catness plus the plural. The plural morpheme, represented by the S in spelling at the end of the word, has 2 different allomorphs. You can spell it as S and have it with a Z sound, like in dogs, or you can spell it as an S and have it with a S sound, like in cats. There's also a 3rd allomorph of this plural morpheme, spelled with an ES and pronounced uz, like in the word wishes. In the word wishes, we have 2 graphs, the letters S and H, that represent just 1 phone, the sh sound, so that SH spelling is a grapheme. There's another allograph, a variant of how to spell that sh sound, as the letter T, like in the word ratio, which has the same sound, spelled in a different way. So if we break down a word like wishes into all these different bits, it's got 2 different morphemes inside of it, each expressed as 2 morphs, so the wish part and the plural part. There are 5 graphemes or phonemes, the phonemes being the distinctive speech sounds, the graphemes being the mappings from spellings to those speech sounds, so there's always the same number of graphemes or phonemes in any particular example. When we go down to the individual representational units, we have 6 graphs, 6 letters that make up the spelling of wishes, and 5 phones, 5 different speech sounds that make up the production of wishes. We have cases where there's no difference in sound when there is a difference in spelling. We also have cases where there's no difference in spelling but a difference in sound. Words that sound the same but have different spellings are called homophones. So things like right and right that are pronounced the same way but spelled differently. Words that are spelled the same but have different pronunciations are called homographs. So L-E-A-D as in lead, to lead a charge, or L-E-A-D as in lead, a box made of lead. Phonetic transcription is an attempt to record what was said as accurately as possible. Transcription is subject to perceptual bias on the part of the transcriber. Those biases include how the transcriber produces the word themselves, their knowledge of the spelling of a word, and the phonemes that are in the transcriber's language if you are trying to transcribe a language you don't speak. So some examples of the process of transcription. The consonant sound in the middle of the word baddie is the same, in my dialect anyway, as in the middle of the word buddy. It's that almost looking like an R thing called a flap. At the end of the sentences, I hit an adder and I hit an adder. Again, I have, in my dialect, the same pronunciation, basically. The a, that flap consonant that sounds a little bit like a T or a D, and I already gave you the example of the final sound in cats versus dogs, where we'd want to transcribe one with the S transcription symbol and the other with the Z transcription symbol. If we look at words that are spelled the same but have some different sounds, like through and bow, words that are spelled differently but have the same sounds, like glue and blue, phonetic transcription makes it clear which one of these rhyme with each other. They have the U symbol for the OO vowel in through, glue, and blue. So in order to be able to write phonetic transcription, you have to be able to identify individual speech sounds, which I've called phones. In the clinic, we refer to this process, especially when we're talking about kids learning language, as phonemic awareness. In this class, we're going to use the International Phonetic Alphabet, a writing system where each symbol represents one speech sound. In other words, there's only one grapheme for each sound, so there are no groups of allographs like there are in ordinary spelling. The International Phonetic Alphabet was designed to be able to write down the sounds of any language, but we mostly will stick to the symbols that are used for English, because that's what we'll be transcribing. To highlight that we're using phonetic transcription, the transcriptions of words and sounds are written between slashes or brackets. So for something like fees, the letters F, I, and Z inside slashes mean that should be pronounced as fees. Some of the symbols from the phonetic alphabet are familiar from English spelling, mostly the consonants. So the P, the B, the T, the D, and so forth are all going to be pronounced as you would expect. If you happen to know Spanish or French, you may find some of the symbols match sounds from that language. So the letter I for the E vowel, the letter E for the A vowel, the letter U for the U vowel, the letter O for the O vowel, and the letter J for the Y consonant. Those are all spelled that way in Spanish or in French and a variety of other languages. So some of these symbols for vowels, some of the other consonants are going to be new to you and will require some extra effort to learn in order to transcribe properly. I've already defined the phoneme, the idea of a distinctive sound in a language. We can have phonemes produced in more than one way, and these different variants, which are non-contrastive, meaning they can't make a meaning difference, are also sometimes referred to as allophones. So we could be referring to a particular instance of a phoneme as an allophone, or all the group of the different versions of a phoneme as allophones. We use the term phone when we want to talk about a speech sound, and be very careful about talking about the physical sound itself, the phone, versus the distinctive sound that's part of the phonology of a language, the phoneme, versus the expression of that phoneme in any particular variant or word instance, the allophone. So one of the largest groups of allophones we have in English is for the T consonant. It can be aspirated, like in the word top, where there's an extra sort of h after the T is released. The T can be unreleased if it's the end of a word. So if I say something like pot, I don't have to have that t part of it there. It can be released but not aspirated. This happens, for example, in the ST consonant cluster in stop. It can be flapped. That example I used before, so in the middle of the word butter, for example, might sound like a D to you, but it's actually produced a little bit quicker and more ballistically than the normal D consonant. And it can be glottalized, at least in my dialect, in something like button, where there's no actual t bit at all, but instead the glottis is closed, the vocal folds are used to make an interruption in speech to indicate that there's a consonant there. And I guess you could say, sort of by convention, that's a way we can express a T sound in English. So all of these sound expressions are different phones, but they are allophones of the same phoneme because we don't make different words with these sound variants. We can carry that distinction between phoneme and phone into transcription, depending on how precise we want to be. So people sometimes talk about doing a phonemic transcription or a broad transcription, where we have kind of a rough approximation of the sound details, focusing on those distinctive sound contrasts. And that'll be sort of the most familiar way to transcribe for you. A phonetic transcription or a narrow transcription is a very careful attempt to capture the actual sounds that were produced. So all of those little details, like whether it was released or not, whether it was aspirated, and so forth. A lot of the transcription that actually gets done clinically, for example, is probably somewhere in between phonemic and phonetic. It's as narrow as it needs to be for the clinical purpose that you're using it for. So this idea of the phoneme, a sound that's part of the English language, has all of these different parts, including what it sounds like so that you can recognize it when you hear it, how that phoneme is produced so that you can say it, including its different allophone variants, and the fact that that phoneme is different from other phonemes, which allows us to perceive differences between words. So we can do a little linguistic analysis of a language to figure out whether speech sounds are allophones of different phonemes or allophones of the same phoneme. Two particular phones are allophones of different phonemes if they can be used to make a minimal pair, a pair of words that differ by just that one phone difference. So for example, we have the phonemes s and z, that are different phonemes from one another because we can make different words like Sue and zoo, where the only difference is the difference between those sounds. Similarly for k versus g, we have Kate and gate, words that have different meanings, and so those sounds must be parts of different phonemes. On the other hand, if I say the word button very carefully, or I say the word button normally with the glottal stop in there, that doesn't make two different words. We don't have the difference between a button and a button in English. It's the same thing. So those are allophones of the same phoneme. Similarly, releasing the stop at the end of the word stop doesn't make a different word. So I can say stop where it's not released, or I can say stop where I have the p bit at the end, and that doesn't make two distinct words in English. Believe it or not, these little differences that are hard for you to hear can potentially make the differences between words in other languages. So when we take all this information and put it together, knowledge of our phonemes, different allophones, is all part of the knowledge of the sound structure of a language, and the broad term for that is the phonology.